Lesson 17 takes what you learned yesterday and brings it into direct relationship with the world you see around you. Yesterday's lesson established that you have no neutral thoughts. Today's lesson reveals the natural consequence. I see no neutral things. This isn't just a logical progression. This is revealing how your mind actually works, how perception actually happens. And it's completely opposite to what you've always believed about seeing and thinking. The usual assumption is that you see things as they are, and then you have thoughts about them. You see a chair, and then you think about whether you like it or not. You see a person, and then you form opinions about them. First the seeing, then the thinking. That's how it seems to work. But the Course is telling you today that this is backwards. The thought always comes first. Always. You never see anything neutrally and then think about it. The thought about what something means happens before you see it. And that thought determines what you see. You don't see neutral things because you don't have neutral thoughts, and your thoughts about everything are creating what you perceive. This is radical because it means the world you see is not something separate from you that you're observing objectively. The world you see is completely constructed by your thoughts about it. Nothing out there is neutral. Nothing is just sitting there being itself, waiting for you to observe it. Everything you see is infused with the meaning your thoughts have given it. Let me read today's lesson directly from the workbook. The idea is, I see no neutral things, and the explanation begins. This idea is another step in the direction of identifying cause and effect as it really operates in the world. You see no neutral things because you have no neutral thoughts. It is always the thought that comes first, despite the temptation to believe that it is the other way around. Notice how clear this is. The thought comes first, always. Despite the temptation to believe otherwise. This isn't a metaphor or a spiritual philosophy. This is a description of how perception actually works in your experience right now. This is not the way the world thinks, but you must learn that it is the way you think. If it were not so, perception would have no cause and would itself be the cause of reality. In view of its highly variable nature, this is hardly likely. The world thinks perception comes first, then thought. But you must learn that you think the opposite way. And here's why this matters. If perception came first, if you really saw things neutrally before thinking about them, then perception would have no cause. It would just be happening randomly. And if perception had no cause, then perception itself would be causing reality. But look at how variable perception is. Different people see the same situation completely differently. If perception were causing reality, reality would be chaos. The fact that perception is so variable proves it's being caused by something, and that something is thought. Your thoughts are causing your perception, which means your perception reveals your thoughts, not objective reality. The practice instructions are straightforward. With eyes open, you say, I see no neutral things because I have no neutral thoughts. Then you look around and apply this to specific things you see. I do not see a neutral whatever it is because my thoughts about that thing are not neutral. The lesson gives examples. I do not see a neutral wall because my thoughts about walls are not neutral. I do not see a neutral body because my thoughts about bodies are not neutral. And then comes an important reminder. As usual, it is essential to make no distinctions between what you believe to be animate or inanimate, pleasant or unpleasant. Don't just apply this to things you have obvious opinions about. Apply it to everything. The wall, the floor, the lamp, your body, another person's. Body, a tree, a cloud. Nothing is neutral. Your thoughts about all of it are not neutral, which means you're not seeing any of it neutrally. Then the lesson says something crucial. Regardless of what you may believe, you do not see anything that is really alive or really joyous. That is because you are unaware as yet of any thought that is really true and therefore really happy. This is profound. You think some things you see are joyous, alive, beautiful. But the lesson is saying that nothing you see through your current perception is really alive or really joyous. Why? Because you're not yet aware of true thoughts. Everything you're seeing is being filtered through false thoughts, thoughts based on separation and fear. So even when something seems beautiful or joyous to you, it's not the real beauty or real joy. It's the ego's version, which is always limited and temporary. To understand today's lesson deeply, you need to grasp what the Course means by projection-making perception. This is one of its fundamental principles. You don't perceive the world and then react to it. You project your thoughts onto the world, and then you perceive what you've projected. Think about what projection means. A movie projector takes an image on film and projects it onto a screen. The screen doesn't create the image. The image comes from the film, from the projector. What you see on the screen is entirely determined by what's in the projector. Your mind works the same way. Your thoughts are the film, the world is the screen, and perception is the projection. What you see out there is entirely determined by what's in here in your mind. The world you perceive is not showing you what's really there. It's showing you your own thoughts. This is why you see no neutral things. Every object, every person, every situation you encounter is being perceived through the lens of your thoughts. And since you have no neutral thoughts, since every thought is choosing between love and fear, truth and illusion, you can't possibly see anything neutrally. Consider how this operates. You walk into a room and immediately you're seeing and interpreting everything based on your existing thoughts. This room is comfortable or uncomfortable, cluttered or organized, welcoming or cold. But these qualities aren't in the room. They're in your thoughts about the room. Someone else with different thoughts walks into the same room and has a completely different experience of it. The same is true for people. You meet someone and instantly, before they've said a word, you're forming impressions. Friendly or unfriendly, trustworthy or suspicious, attractive or unattractive. These impressions feel like they're coming from the person, like you're observing qualities that exist in them. But you're actually seeing your thoughts about them, your past experiences, your fears, your desires, your judgments, all projected onto this person and perceived as if they're characteristics of the person. The lesson emphasizes that this applies to everything equally. You make distinctions between animate and inanimate, between pleasant and unpleasant. You think your perception of a person is fundamentally different from your perception of a chair, but both are being created by your thoughts. Both are projections. Neither is neutral. This is especially important to understand about bodies. You see bodies everywhere, including your own, and you think these bodies are just physical objects that exist independently. But your thoughts about bodies are profoundly non-neutral. You see bodies as vulnerable, as capable of suffering, as subject to aging and death, as sources of pleasure or pain. All of these are thoughts you're projecting onto bodies. You're not seeing bodies as they truly are. You're seeing your ego's interpretation of bodies. The lesson ends with that striking statement. You don't see anything that is really alive or really joyous because you're not yet aware of true thoughts. This reveals something essential. Real life, real joy, real beauty exist, but you can't see them through false perception. The ego's perception, which is all you have access to right now, can't show you true life because the ego itself is based on the denial of life. The ego believes in death, in separation, in limitation. So everything seen through ego perception is tinged with death, separation, limitation. True vision, which the Course is training you toward, sees with different thoughts. It sees the eternal, the unified, the unlimited. And when you see with true vision, everything is alive, everything is joyous, because you're seeing through thoughts that are true. The practice today is experiential and immediate. You're not contemplating abstract ideas. You're looking directly at the world around you and recognizing that what you see is not neutral. Begin with eyes open, which is different from many of the earlier lessons. You say, I see no neutral things because I have no neutral thoughts. This reminds you of the connection between thought and perception that you're investigating today. Then look around you. Don't strain to find particular objects. Just let your attention naturally rest on things in your environment. For each thing you notice, pause long enough to say, I do not see a neutral object because my thoughts about that object are not neutral. What makes this practice powerful is its directness. You're not theorizing about perception. You're actually looking at things and recognizing that your perception of them is not neutral. The wall you're looking at seems to just be there, neutral, a simple physical object. But as you apply today's idea to it, you recognize that your thoughts about walls are not neutral. You have associations, meanings, interpretations about walls. Maybe walls represent safety, or confinement, or structure, or separation. These thoughts are there, shaping what you see, even if you're not consciously aware of them. Do this with various objects. A chair. What are your non-neutral thoughts about chairs? Comfort, utility, design, memories of specific chairs? A window. What do windows mean to you? Connection to outside, light, escape, beauty, vulnerability? None of these meanings are in the objects themselves. They're all in your thoughts. Apply this to bodies with particular attention. You see your own body and other bodies constantly, and you have extremely non-neutral thoughts about bodies. Thoughts about attractiveness, health, aging, gender, race, ability. Thoughts about bodies as sources of pleasure or pain. Thoughts about identification with bodies. When you look at a body and say, I do not see a neutral body because my thoughts about bodies are not neutral, you're beginning to recognize how heavily loaded with meaning your perception of bodies is. The practice asks you to make no distinctions between animate and inanimate, pleasant and unpleasant. This is crucial. The ego wants you to believe that some things are more important than others, that people matter more than objects, that pleasant things are good and unpleasant things are bad. But for this practice, treat everything the same. Your thoughts about all of it are not neutral, which means you're not seeing any of it as it truly is. The lesson recommends 3 or 4 practice periods, with at least 3 required, even if you experience resistance. If you do feel resistance, you can shorten the practice. Periods. The resistance itself is significant. It's showing you how much the ego is invested in the belief that you see things objectively, that your perception is neutral and accurate. The ego doesn't want you to recognize that everything you see is your own projection. As you practice this lesson, several things typically become apparent. First, you may notice how much meaning you've assigned to ordinary objects. Things you thought you saw neutrally turn out to carry significant associations and interpretations. A clock isn't just a timekeeper. It represents pressure, scheduling, the passage of time, mortality. A door isn't just an opening. It represents transition, choice, entry or exit, privacy or access. You may also become aware of how quickly and automatically these interpretations happen. By the time you're consciously looking at something, your mind has already decided what it means. The practice today slows this down, helping you catch the thought that's shaping the perception. Another common experience is recognizing the difference between what you think you see and what might actually be there. That person across from you. You see a whole constellation of characteristics, but you're recognizing that these characteristics are your thoughts, not necessarily who they are. This can create a strange sense of uncertainty. If what you see isn't neutral, isn't objective, then what's really there? This uncertainty is actually progress. You're beginning to question the reliability of perception. You're recognizing that what you've always taken for reality is actually your own construction. This questioning is necessary for learning to see differently. You might also notice defensive reactions. The ego resists this practice because it's threatening the ego's whole system. The ego needs you to believe that the world is out there, separate from you, that things have inherent meanings and characteristics independent of your thoughts. Today's lesson is dismantling this belief, showing you that nothing is separate from your thoughts about it. Some objects will seem easier to recognize as non-neutral than others. It's relatively easy to see that your perception of another person isn't neutral. It's harder to recognize that your perception of a wall or a table isn't neutral. But the lesson asks you to apply the idea equally to everything, because the principle is the same for all perception. The statement that you don't see anything really alive or really joyous might create a sense of loss or sadness initially, but it's actually pointing toward hope. If what you currently see isn't real life and real joy, then real life and real joy must be something else, something you can learn to see. The limitation isn't in reality. The limitation is in your perception, which means it can change. Lesson 17 deepens your understanding of how your mind creates your experience. You see no neutral things because you have no neutral thoughts. The thought always comes first, creating what you perceive. This isn't the way the world thinks perception works, but it's the way your mind actually works. This recognition is liberating because it reveals where real power lies. You're not a passive observer of an objective world. You're actively creating what you see through your thoughts. If you don't like what you're seeing, if you're experiencing conflict and suffering, the problem isn't out there in the world. The problem is in your thoughts, which means it can be corrected. The practice today trains you to notice the relationship between your thoughts and your perception. Every time you look at something and recognize that your perception of it isn't neutral, you're loosening the ego's grip on your mind. You're beginning to see that what you've always taken for reality is actually a construction based on thoughts you can learn to question and change. Continue practicing throughout the day. Look at ordinary objects and recognize that your perception of them is shaped by your thoughts. Don't try to change your perception or force yourself to see differently. Simply recognize that what you're seeing is not neutral. This recognition itself begins the process of transformation. If you want to deepen your understanding, I invite you to watch the other videos. The text explores in depth the nature of projection and what it really means to see with the eyes of the Holy Spirit. The explanations of the text, along with daily practice, accelerate transformation. Today's lesson is teaching you something revolutionary, that cause and effect operate in the opposite direction from what you've always believed. Thoughts cause perception, not the other way around. As you learn to recognize this, you're taking a crucial step toward freedom. You're beginning to understand that you're not a victim of the world you see, because the world you see is coming from your own mind. And what comes from your mind can be changed through the transformation of your thoughts from fear to love, from illusion to truth.